一段と早くなったじゃないか。My friend.
If you grew up loving the now classic animation Final Fantasy Advent Children, then you're already familiar with the characters and general theme of this game. For those who don't know, Final Fantasy VII was originally released on PS1 back in 1997. Decades later, Square Enix decided to remake this beloved title, but instead of releasing one complete game, they stretched the story into 3 full-length RPGs, 2 of which have been released so far. Today, I'll be talking about the second game in the series, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Right off the bat, I'll mention that I had mixed feelings about the first game, I mean the remake, and my expectations for this one were already very low, especially since the reviews consistently mentioned how unnecessarily long it was. However, since it had been in my backlog for quite some time, I decided to give it a go. In this review, I'll break down the good and bad of this popular Japanese RPG. Let's start with the obvious, the graphics. From the very beginning, as you'd expect after playing the first game, you'll notice how beautiful Rebirth looks. That said, in terms of art direction, large portions of the game don't offer much to admire. But if we're just talking about raw technical power, it's undeniably a pretty game. A few years ago, when I played Final Fantasy VII Remake on my PS4, I was in awe of how incredible it looked. This time though, I wasn't surprised or fascinated by any section of the game. Maybe it's because I played it right after Expedition 33, a jaw-dropping masterpiece. Still, for the average gamer, Rebirth should look good enough to hold their attention. Alright, let's talk about the combat. If you played the first game, you'll find the combat very similar, with a few new additions. However, if you're new to the series, you might find it unique. There aren't many games with this kind of hybrid fighting system. The original Final Fantasy VII had turn-based combat, but the remake switched to a real-time hybrid system. You can move freely during battles, dodging, blocking, and even parrying attacks before countering with standard or special moves. But it doesn't stop there. As you fight, you earn ATB points, which let you use abilities, magic, or items. When you trigger these actions, the game pauses briefly, opening a menu where you select your next move. For some, this might sound boring or frustrating, but I actually found it kind of charming at times. That said, I think I would have preferred fully turn-based combat, especially after playing Expedition 33. My biggest issues with the combat though was the inconsistent difficulty. 90% of the game is way too easy, with absolutely no real challenge. And the other 10%, enemies with massive health bars, immunity to damage, or attacks that stun-lock you to death. Some foes can even one-shot your entire party without warning. There was no middle ground, and I either breezed through the fights feeling nothing, or got furious at unfair difficulty spikes. The next topic that I'd like to discuss is the limitations. One of the game's biggest flaws is how often it reminds you that it's more of an interactive movie than a game. What do I mean? Well, for instance, you'll watch a 10-minute cutscene, walk 20 steps, and then get hit with another 10-minute cutscene. Or there were times I set the controller down for nearly an hour because there was barely any gameplay, just back-to-back cutscenes. I had the same issue with the Yakuza series and its long cutscenes, but at least those were charming and funny. Here, they feel forced, childish, and packed with cringe-worthy one-liners. If you're going to force players to sit through hours of pre-rendered videos, at least make them entertaining. But sadly, Rebirth fails at that. Now let's talk about pacing and open world. If a developer includes an open world, they better have a good reason for it. Games like The Witcher 3 and Red Dead Redemption 2 make their worlds feel alive with meaningful side quests and engaging exploration. Rebirth? Not so much. It has tedious side quests like fetch quests and lifeless NPCs, very bland environments with useless loot, and minigames that feel like they were designed for kids aged 3 to 9. I mean, if you removed all the filler, you'd be left with maybe 10 to 20 hours of actual gameplay. Instead, we get a bloated, padded experience. Alright, let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is the story. You might think most of my complaints also apply to Remake. So why did I like that one more? Simple. Rebirth barely has a story. There are no major twists, no real turning points. The ending is predictable, you'll see it coming like 20 hours before that, and there is zero character development. Cloud, Aerith, and Barret feel flatter than in the first game. And the new characters, Red 13, a talking dog, he was fine but forgettable. Then there's Cat, he was cringe, and I hated him. And then there's Yuffie, she's very annoying in Remake, but so much more in here. The dialogue lacks charm or depth, and every character feels like an open book with nothing interesting to say. After the story, I just want to mention the useless mechanics in the games. There were things that I could make a list of, and I actually did, but I don't want to go through depth because it would take forever for me to finish this video. So let me just give you some of the things on the top of my head. The first one is the skill points, or SP. You would grind for hours to get levels, to get the speeds, to do what? To open a perk that gives you 3% damage boost to staggered enemies. Wow, so game changing. The second thing is Chadley, the annoying kid that gives you challenges. He has endless tasks and there is nothing to gain out of them. Like, the loot that you get is really meaningless and it's just mostly frustrating. The next thing that almost all the game I was asking myself was, why is there a crafting system here? You can buy anything that you want from the shops anyway, and you have to gather like thousands of different kinds of ingredients to make a stupid, pointless potion. Why would anybody do that? I didn't even use more than half of the items that I had in my inventory before beating the game, and there was really no need even to buy them, and you usually have enough money to buy whatever you want, so why would you waste your time gathering materials? Alright, let's talk about some of the characters that I think were completely useless. The first one, surprisingly, was Aerith. She was absolutely weak and clunky to play. Her normal attacks were completely useless, her defensive mechanics weren't really worth it, and she didn't do any kind of damage. The only good thing about her was the prayer materia that you could use in any other character, so she was really not necessary in this game. The second character is the Cat. He was a joke in the cutscenes, and he was a joke in combat. There was really no actual impact that he could have. There was no specialty that he would, be distinguished by. So I really felt really pained and bored when I was playing with him. And there was just one character in this game that I loved from the cartoon back in 2005, and they showed him, and he was, I think, the only cool character that was introduced in Rebirth, and still they didn't let us play with him, and that's Vincent. I really wanted to play as Vincent in my party, but instead I had to play with a talking cat and a talking dog and a useless girl. Perfect. Alright, let's get to the final verdict. There were a few moments of fun, I admit, but they were far too rare. I only pushed through because I wanted to finish this chapter and hope the next game is better. Do I recommend it to you? Really no. Not if you value your time or money. Even if you're a die-hard fan of Final Fantasy VII, you might be able to tolerate it, but you will probably be disappointed. I was pretty bummed out by this one, but hope this review was helpful to you. See you in the next time, probably with a better game. Take care, and bye bye.